Star Wars, Young Jedi Knights, The Lost Ones, Chapter 6. At the appointed hour that evening, Zeke arrived at the enormous palace and was ushered inside. New Republic guards checked his name against the improved visitor list and let him proceed into the elegant corridors with their high vaulted ceilings. Although he knew his way out to Jason and Jaina's quarters, the uniformed soldiers insisted on escorting him, which Zeke found somewhat intimidating. His new formal clothes were stiff and exceedingly uncomfortable. But he knew that his dinner was an important occasion. He silently vowed not to embarrass anyone. He especially didn't want to disappoint the twins. Before old Peckham had departed for his lonely mirror station duties, he'd helped Zeke select a few items of formal clothing, and the young man had also gone out trading, bartering some of his best trinkets and artifacts for a particularly sleek jacket. Now he felt like a dandy as he rode the turbolift up to the higher levels and wound his way through the maze of corridors to the Chief of State's quarters. The protocol droid, C-3PO, met Zeke at the doorway and hustled him inside, dismissing the soldier escort.
"Ah, there you are, young Master Zeke. We must hurry. You're late. We have preparations to make."
Zeke tugged at his uncomfortable formal suit. "What do you mean, preparations? I'm dressed. What more do you want?" 3PO tisked through his mouth speaker and bustled in front of Zeke's shirt.
"Dear me, these clothes are indeed fine and the most interesting. According to my files, they were quite fashionable some decades ago. Quite a historical find, I should say."
Zeke felt a stab of disappointment. He had worked so hard, doing his absolute best to prepare for this special event. In the space of a few seconds, the Percy droid had dismissed all of his efforts. Leia Organa hurried out of the back room, her dark eyes widening as she saw him. Hello, Zeke. Glad you could make it." Her gaze seemed to dissect Zeke. He clenched his teeth and tried not to show any embarrassment. Though he was sure his cheeks were flushed crimson, his fine suit now seemed ridiculous to him as a clown's costume. I hope I'm not being too much of a bother," he stammered. "I didn't mean for Jaina and Jason to invite me." "Don't worry about it," Leia said quickly and smiled. "The ambassador from Karnak Alpha has brought her own brood of children, so please relax. Just do the best you can." 3PO returned with a kit of grooming implements.
"First, we'll groom your hair, my young Master Zeke. Everything must be presentable. This is a matter of diplomatic pride for the New Republic. Though I do wish I could have located these old files about the customs of Karnak Alpha. The palace seems to have forgotten my protocol programmers."
He fussed over Zeke's hair.
"Dear me, you could certainly use a trim. I wonder if we have time."
Jaina and Jason came out to greet their friend as he stood soundlessly enduring the golden droid's over-attentive ministrations. Jason's hair seemed awkwardly straight, his face scrubbed so clean that Zeke barely recognized the boy.
"Hello, Zeke,"
Jaina cried with sincere delight, but when she noticed his outfit, she covered her mouth with a stifled giggle. He felt his cheeks burning with fresh shame. When Zeke struggled against the buzzing device, 3PO said sternly,
"I am a protocol droid, you know, fully trained in grooming techniques."
Zeke didn't argue, but he winced to see 3PO clear a snag in his dark hair. I'm not sure this is a good idea," Zeke said. "I don't know anything about diplomacy. I don't know any manners or etiquette." Jaina laughed. "It's not important. Just use your common sense and watch what the rest of us do. It's a big diplomatic banquet, and you have to follow all sorts of boring ceremonies, but the food's good. You'll enjoy it." Zeke didn't point out that it was easy for Jaina to say such things since she had been brought up in this high political society and trained in the proper responses for so many years, and that such actions were second nature to her. Zeke, though, had no such instruction. The whole dinner was going to be a disaster. He just knew it. C-3PO finally gave up on his efforts to comb out Zeke's hair and shook his gloomy head in exasperation.
"Oh, dear. I have a bad feeling about this," he sighed.
Zeke couldn't argue with him. Tenel Ka followed the group as they filed forward to the formal dining chamber, conscious of her every movement. This was an important diplomatic function, and she had been well tutored by her harsh grandmother in the plush courts of Happy's cluster. Tenel Ka was a royal princess, after all, the heir apparent to an entire cluster, but she avoided such nonsense and spent her time as much as possible training instead on her mother's austere world of Dathomir. Tenel Ka's Happen grandmother strongly disapproved of a path that the princess had chosen to follow, but Tenel Ka had a mind of her own, and she frequently demonstrated. Now she strode behind Jason, Jaina, and Zeke, walking next to Lobaka and the silent younger Anakin as they hurried into the dining chamber.
She wore a short, tight-fitting sheath of colorful reptilian hides, freshly oiled and polished so they gleamed with her every movement. Her muscular arms and legs were bare, but she wore a flowing cape of deep forest green over her shoulders. Tenelka had spent many months at a Jedi Academy in the primitive jungles of Yavin 4, and before that she lived in the cliff cities of the Singing Mountain Clan. It had been a long time since she'd been spoiled with luxuries, but she viewed the formal evening meal with a Karnak ambassador as another challenge to face. Lobaka had been shampooed and dried, his fur neatly combed so that he seemed much thinner than usual without his swirling hair sticking out in all directions. The black streak that swept back above his eyebrow had been slicked down, giving him a dashing appearance for a Wookiee. C-3PO strutted ahead of Leia and Han as if he were an escort. The New Republic guard stood beside the entrance to the great dining hall and swung the doors as wide as they approached. Clasping Han Solo's arm, Leia walked in, regal in her fine white robes. Though small of stature, the chief of state seemed full of energy and confidence, like a battery overcharged with power. Tenelka admired her. Their timing was exactly right. As they passed into the dining hall from one end, the opposite entrance opened, and the ambassador from Karnak Alpha entered, followed by her train of 8 children. The ambassador was a haystack of tan hair, a mound of fur that grew so long that it obscured every other feature of her body. Not even the ambassador's eyes were visible, peeping out from between the strands, as she scuttled forward on her feet, also hidden by her flowing tresses. The ambassador took her place at the head of the table beside the seat reserved for the chief of state. Leia sat down with her husband next to her. The ambassador's children, all 8 of them, were miniature versions of her, heaps of hair that bustled into their seats. The girl's fur was knotted into colorful ribbons, while the boys jingled with bells tied to strands of hair. All of them seemed well-groomed and impeccably behaved as they took their seats along one side of the table. Tenelka was glad she had thought to braid colorful ribbons into her own red-gold hair. She had seen natives of Karnak Alpha during her time in the royal court of Hapes. The hairy creatures were shy and had some unusual costumes, but they were relatively easygoing. Tenelka sat beside Lobaka, while Jason and Jaina took their dark-haired friend Zeke to the front end of the long, polished table. Their little brother Anakin, with his eerie, ice-blue eyes, seemed content to sit anywhere they directed him, quietly waiting for his place between Lobaka and Jason. C-3PO moved up and down the line, fussing over items and reveling his position. And reveling in his position. This type of duty was, after all, what a protocol droid was programmed for, not for bravery or adventure, but for intricate diplomatic functions. In front of each gleaming plate sat a crystalline vase containing a cluster of fresh, rich-smelling greens, exotic plants taken from some of Coruscant's botanical gardens. Interesting specimens that formed a lovely bouquet for each honored visitor. Before the start of the meal, Leia gave a careful rehearsed speech welcoming the ambassador and expressing her wish for a long and fruitful relationship based on commerce, mutual respect, and support. She whispered to C-3PO, and the droid disappeared into an alcove, only to reemerge a moment later carrying a small package. Tenelka immediately recognized an incubator sheath wrapped around a smooth ovoid object. "Hey, that's the hawkbat egg we rescued," Jason said, unable to stop himself. Leia smiled and nodded. "Yes, and I suppose the ambassador may appreciate the gift even more, now knowing it was found by the very children she is dining with." The Karnak ambassador trembled with excitement, her long hair jingling as Leia explained. "Madam Ambassador, we know very little about your culture, but we do know that you have a great love for unusual zoological specimens. We have reports of your magnificent holographic dioramas and huge alternate environment zoos where animals don't even realize they're in a cage. As a diplomatic gift to you and our people, we present to you this rare and precious hawkback egg, one of the most difficult to catch creatures native to Imperial City. Very few of them are in captivity." Delighted, the Karnak ambassador cooed, "This will surely be a wonderful addition to our rarities."
Daddy, don't make this!
But you have to take special care of it, Jason chided. "I promised its mother personally." The hairy ambassador didn't seem to find the comment at all strange. "I give you my solemn promise." Then the ambassador responded with her own rehearsed speech, her mouth moving somewhere between the strands of her fur as she echoed the sentiments Leia had expressed.
Meanwhile, her children, little wriggling piles of hair, sat impatient and hungry for the meal, while Jason, Jaina, and the other Jedi Knights similarly felt their stomachs growling. Han Solo squirmed restlessly beside Leia in his formal clothes, as if chafing under his stiff collar and his medals of military service. Tenel Ka felt sympathy for him. C-3PO came into the room, strutting beside a trundle droid that carried a beaten silver tray of ornate plates piled high with scrumptious-looking cuisine, beautifully garnished and displayed. Out of political courtesy, the golden droid marched toward the head of the table, while Leia and the Karnak ambassador made the appropriate appreciative sound, showing how impressed they were with the exquisite food. Tenel Ka watched C-3PO move directly toward the ambassador, picking up one of the larger plates from the droid's tray. She instantly knew that C-3PO meant to offer the meal first to the ambassador, which was a terribly rude thing to do, according to Karnak custom. In one quick, fluid motion, she sprang to her feet and called across the table. "Excuse me, C-3PO," she said. "If you would allow me." She hurried to one end of the table as the droid stopped, completely at loss what to do. One by one, Tenel Ka removed the plates from the tray and reverently set them each in front of the ambassador's children, starting with the smallest, presumably the youngest, a furball. Princess Leia looked at Tenel Ka, surprised but reserving judgment. The Karnak ambassador made a motion that must have been a bow of her head. "Why, thank you, young lady. You do us a great honor. This is an unexpected observance of our customs." Tenel Ka nudged C-3PO and moved him around to the other side of the table, where she tapped Anakin on the shoulder. She handed the boy a plate, then whispered to his ear. Anakin, without question or agreement, stood up, dutifully moved down the table, and presented the next plate of food to the Karnak ambassador. The ambassador chirped with surprise. "I am most honored, Chief of State," she said to Leia, "that you would choose your youngest to serve me." I thank you," Leia said, uncertain of what to say. Tenel Ka stood behind Leia, nodding. Her braided, red-gold hair fell forward. "Yes, Ambassador," she said. "We wish to show our honor by respecting the customs of Karnak Alpha, that a young member of the household provides for the guest's children, for a child of the host family serves the most honored adult guest." "I am most pleased," the ambassador said. "We shall have a simple time making diplomatic treaties if all members of the new republic are so considerate of our customs." Trembling with relief that she had averted what could have been a social gaffe for the chief of state, Tenel Ka sat back down, while Jason bent toward her, his brandy-brown eyes wide with astonishment. "How did you know that?" he said in a low whisper. Tenel Ka shrugged beneath her reptilian armor. It is something I learned," she said, and then fell silent, reluctant to reveal her old royal upbringing, even to a good friend. Even though Zeke sat back and remained quiet, he still felt uncomfortable. The meal tasted delicious, but each time he moved, he was afraid that one of his gestures might offend someone or cause a diplomatic incident. C-3PO served the rest of the meals, and Zeke fell to eating with quiet attention, savoring the delicious food, though it was far richer than what he had accustomed to. The salad in the crystal bowl in front of him was crunchy and strange, some of the leaves bitter, others stingy, but he had eaten far worse in his days of scavenging the streets. He had roasted rock slugs and eaten sliced stericate fungus. The greens were at least fresh, and he relished them. The conversation around the table seemed to be empty, polite chit-chat, and Zeke, feeling like an irreverent guest, did his best to participate. He pushed aside the empty crystal bowl. "Delicious salad," he said. "I don't believe I've ever had greens like that." That sounded good. A complimentary but neutral statement. Enough to show a willingness to take part in a dinner conversation, yet nothing more could fault him for. Suddenly, he felt all eyes turned toward him. He looked down to see if he spilled something down the front of his out-of-style jacket. Jason seemed full of disbelief. Tenel Ka made no sign that she even heard Zeke's comment. Jaina nudged Zeke with her elbow in a teasing way. "That wasn't a salad," she said. "That's the bouquet. You weren't supposed to eat it." Zeke listened in horror, but kept his face a careful mask. C-3PO spoke up from behind him. "Now then, Mistress Jaina, many plants are edible, including those within the bouquet. I'm certain there's no harm." From the far end of the table, Princess Leia cleared her throat. "I'm glad you like the salad, Zeke," she said in a voice loud enough that everyone
for everyone to hear and pulled her crystal dish toward her. She selected a frilly purple-green leaf and stuffed it into her mouth, munching contentedly. Hansel looked at his wife as if she'd gone crazy, then jerked as if he'd been kicked under the table. He, too, began to eat his bouquet. Jaina followed suit, and soon everyone at the table had devoured their salads. Zeke was mortified, though he tried not to show it. His manners were laughable, his clothing was outdated, and he embarrassed everyone by eating something he should not have known was a decoration. He wished he had never been invited to the bouquet. He endured the rest of the evening in simmering silence until the Karnak ambassador and her entourage of fur-balled children finally departed, accompanying the chief of state and her husband. When the New Republic escorts came to return them to their rooms, Zeke decided to take the first opportunity to escape. "Don't worry about tonight, Zeke," Jaina said with an understanding voice. "You're a friend. That's all that matters." Zeke felt stung by her comment. In fact, by the fact that she had needed to say such a thing. He didn't belong there. That truth was etched in burning letters in his brain. He should have known better, but he had pretended that he could fit in with such high-class friends. When he slipped out the back door of the main dining hall, fully intending to walk too fast for even the rigid escorts to keep up with him, Jaina tried to stop him. "Wait!" she called. "We're still going to meet tomorrow night, right? We promised to help you get the central multitasking unit for Peckham." Zeke didn't particularly want to go home, but he certainly couldn't stay. He hurried out into the corridors without answering Jaina.